retro food fans. Today we are going to go all the way back to 1966 and way earlier to discover Swedish meatballs, which aren't really Swedish. You're going to love them. I'm Jill and this is YesterKitchen. So Swedish meatballs, or in Swedish, köttbullar. Yep, they're fabulous. They have been part of our history for years and years and decades, especially in the 50s and 60s when they were crazy popular. I'll get into why, but first of all, I wanted to let you know a little known secret. Ready? Swedish meatballs are not Swedish. What? Oh yeah, so Swedish meatballs are really Turkish. So I'm just gonna get started because there is quite a bit of work and I will tell you the story as we go. So the first thing we're gonna do is I have 1 pound of ground beef and 1/4 pound of ground pork. And into a nice big mixing bowl they go. And along with that, I have 2/3 cup of evaporated milk. This recipe is from 1966 during the heyday of Swedish meatballs. A 1/2 cup of breadcrumbs. I always use fresh. You can use whatever you like. But when I have like little ends of bread, I just kind of whip them up in the blender, make them in crumbs, and throw them in the freezer. They keep forever, and you always have nice fresh breadcrumbs. To that, we have 2 tablespoons of very finely chopped onion, 2 teaspoons of salt, and a 1/2 teaspoon of pepper, and the very Swedish flavoring, 1/2 teaspoon of allspice. And now to that, we're just gonna use our best mixing tools ever, impeccably clean hands, and we're gonna mix all of that together. So, Swedish meatballs. How did they get to Sweden and why are they from Turkey? So back in the 18th century, the King of Sweden was Charles VII. Take a look, there he is. So he managed to get himself exiled from Sweden for 5 years, and he went to Turkey. And while he was in Turkey, he had their meatballs, which were these meatballs, and he absolutely fell in love. So when he returned from Turkey back to Sweden, he brought the recipe with him. And he shared it with his, he was the king, so his inner circle was the upper class. They fell in love, and everybody wanted these meatballs. They just were amazing, which they are. And so what happened is that this recipe and these meatballs kind of filtered down to the entire Swedish population, and everyone fell in love with them. And that's kind of how Sweden kind of adopted these meatballs. So I'll get back to more of that in a second. But right now I've got to make some meatballs. So I'm going to switch this for this. And I have here in a pie plate about I have here in a pie plate about 1 cup of flour. You probably don't need this much, but it's always to err on the bigger side so you don't have to pour more in. Now I'm just gonna put this right here and we're gonna start making meatballs. So, we take meatballs. Swedish meatballs are not spaghetti and meatballs. They're maybe golf ball size. They're pretty small. That is your Swedish meatball. And from there, you're just gonna roll your little meatball in your flour and just kind of shake it off. And then onto the cookie sheet, I just have it on some wax paper, it goes. So you're gonna go ahead and you're gonna make all the meatballs you can. It's gonna make about 24 to 26, and we'll be right back. Okay, so our meatballs are done. Take a look. Hey, look at these beautiful things. They are all just about golf ball size, covered in flour, ready to go. And actually, I probably got about 35 out of here, so you never know. But they're fabulous. And now in a large pan, I have a 1/2 stick of butter that is melting. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put these meatballs into the butter, just like that, and let them start to brown. So how did Swedish meatballs get from Sweden to America? Because in the 1950s and the 1960s, they were huge. Everyone loved them. But in the 50s and 60s, how did they even get here? So in the 19th century and the 20th century, world travel became more accessible. And as people started traveling the world from Sweden to other parts of the world, they would bring their recipes with them. And America discovered Swedish meatballs and never looked back. So why the 1960s popularity? It was a glorious food fad. See, in the 1930s and the 1940s and probably the early 50s, when you invited company over for dinner, it was a very formal affair. Men would wear suits and ties, women wear dresses. Like, all you have to do is take a look at I Love Lucy to see that. And if you want to know more about I Love Lucy, take a look at that. You're going to love it. So in the 60s, people started wanting to have more casual parties and not so much formal. So that's where the cocktail party got really popular. And another thing that got popular was the buffet dinner. So instead of a classic sit-down dinner, it was just so much easier to put out platters of food and let the guests help themselves. And Swedish Meatballs lended itself perfectly for both the buffet dinners and the cocktail parties, because Swedish Meatballs could be served on toothpicks, or they were really easy to just serve on a plate to the individual guest. Okay, so now take a look. Our meatballs are all browned. This has been going on for maybe about 8-10 minutes. And you just want to kind of turn them until they're all nice and brown. And look how gorgeous they are. So all you're going to do now is you want to cook these through before we make that fabulous Swedish meatball gravy. So we're just going to leave them as is. We're going to turn it down to about a medium heat, and we're going to add a ½ cup of hot water. And then we're going to cover, and we're going to let these things simmer for about 10 minutes. Okay, it's been 10 minutes. Take a look. Look at those glorious meatballs. They have cooked through, but because we browned them in advance, they're gorgeous. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our meatballs out of the pan. And I can tell just by feeling them with the tongs that they are now cooked through, because they're not mushy anymore. Oh my God, guys, this is just so good. It is very clear why the 1960s loved them. And I'm actually kind of sad that they fell out of favor, except for our friends IKEA. Maybe it's time to bring them back into the American house. Have a dinner party, make it a buffet, serve Swedish meatballs, or have a cocktail party. Either way, there is no reason why these glorious dishes that came from Turkey shouldn't be brought back. Okay, so we've got our meatballs out, and now we're gonna make some mushroom water. What? Stick with me, really easy. I have here a can of sliced mushrooms. I can't really tilt it too much because I did not drain it. But what you're gonna do is you're gonna drain all the liquid into a measuring cup. And then you're just gonna add water to make it a full cup. That's it. There's your mushroom water. Okay, now what we have is 2 tablespoons of flour. And we're just gonna sprinkle that all over, all the drippings, the juices, and the butter. We're gonna take a little whisk, turn that around, and whisk all the flour in really well so you don't have clumps. And you can already tell it's starting to seize up, which is exactly what you want. Okay, now you're gonna add your cup of mushroom water into the pan. And you're gonna add a cup of evaporated milk, which is really just the remainder after you took the 1/3 cup out for the meat. So 1 12-ounce can of evaporated milk will totally do it for you. Now you're gonna just whisk this and stir it and cook it until it gets thickened. So it's been about 5-6 minutes. Take a look. Our gravy is just thickening up with all that flour and butter. So you kind of got a roux thing thickening it up. But look at that. It's just beautiful. So now what we're gonna do, remember that can of mushrooms we drained? We're gonna add the mushrooms in. And just make sure you get them all. And we're gonna stir that around. And then we're gonna add our meatballs back in, along with whatever juice is collected in the bottom of the bowl. Look at that. Does that look familiar? Beautiful, classic Swedish meatballs. Oh my God, you guys, these are so good. And now that you know the history, and you have a special day to make them on, I highly encourage it. And by the way, I did lead you astray. I did say 1/3 cup of evaporated milk in with the meat mixture. Sorry, it was 2/3 cup. So by the time you use the 2/3 cup of the meat, you can just pour the remainder of the can, which will be a cup, in your gravy. Okay, right, so now you want to let this cook for just about 2 minutes so everything warms through. So while we're doing that, let's talk about serving. So meatballs, classic Swedish meatballs in a chafing dish on their own are classic and perfect. But then our friends IKEA came along and they had a very, very specific way, and still do, of serving them, which is just as wonderful. So either have these out in a chafing dish or just a warm bowl for your party or your buffet, because you know you want to recreate a 60s dinner. And or you can make a platter out of it. So what I have here is a scoop of mashed potatoes, and I have classic lingonberries, which was an addition from Sweden. And lingonberries, if you don't know what they are, they're very similar in taste to like a cranberry sauce. Maybe a little bit sweeter, but very, very similar, and they go beautifully with our meatballs. So let's go ahead and serve this up. We're gonna take a few meatballs. Then I'm gonna push this out of the way. And we're gonna serve it. Now I have lingonberries from Al Johnson, which is a classic Swedish restaurant. You need to get them online, but a lot of specialty stores and even some grocery stores have lingonberries right in your market, so you don't have to do that. But I thought I'd go a little authentic because why not? So then we serve just a little bit of lingonberries on the side. And there you go. Classic, beautiful Swedish meatballs, ready to go. If you would like to explore more dishes from your childhood or just the past, I invite you to subscribe. I release new videos every Friday. In the meantime, here's a few more retro dishes for you. And remember, every dish, even Swedish meatballs, has a story. I'll see you in the next video.